Hello, everyone. Rebecca Weber here. We're filming live from CPAC. Joining me now is Congressman Matt Gaetz from Florida's 1st District. Matt, thank you so Congressman, rather. Thank you so much for being here
Matt's
with me.
fine. We're old friends. We've done this before.
Yeah, you have been unapologetic when it comes to standing for America First policies and all of the great work that you've done. Now, we have a very narrow number of Republicans currently. In your view, and that's under Speaker Johnson and under his leadership, do you see anything that might happen during this legislative session under Johnson with our narrow margins?
I have just left the stage where I remarked that it's the punt in the block that Republicans seem to be executing. I like to air it out a little bit, take some risks, and do what needs to be done for the country. But I'm glad that we blocked that terrible Langford amnesty bill. I'm glad that we blocked the $95 billion package that McConnell had put together to deficit spend in our country to give billions to Ukraine and other nations. And I'm glad we punted Kevin McCarthy, though we probably shouldn't have punted on the needed spending cuts that will drive down our debts and deficits. And also the reauthorization of FISA is something that we should not have done. We should have curtailed that program because it had been so weaponized against President Trump and so many of our fellow Americans of all political stripes. So I wouldn't give the 118th Congress a particularly high grade because I think too often we're pushing things into the future that are only going to get more difficult to solve. And what I know about President Trump is that he's got this contagious courage. When he's around and tackling a problem and laying out a vision, it gets a lot of these weak-kneed Republicans right now that are, hiding under the table a little more spirit.
So, Congressman, if you were to look at your crystal ball into the future, do you think that we might see Republicans, conservatives might gain 20 or 30?
I do. I don't necessarily think that's because we've earned it. In 2016, we had a bunch of these lackluster, weak Republicans dragged over the finish line by President Trump. He had done such a remarkable job identifying non-traditional voters and getting them to the ballot box for support for his presidential campaign. And a lot of those voters went down the ballot and voted for Republicans because they wanted President Trump to have a good team. And I think that will actually result in people winning who otherwise haven't really animated their service with the fighting spirit that I try to inject into the institution.
Well, let's hope that your crystal ball is right. Now, one of the number one issues among AMAC members is this terrible border crisis. And what I find baffling is that we're spending 75 times roughly more sending money to Ukraine than securing our own border. What say you on that?
It just is a crazy sentence to even utter, isn't it?
Yes.
I mean, our lawmakers here should be worried about our country. That should not be a controversial position. But you know why? A lot of times, these folks get a little Potomac fever. They get here in the nation's capital, and everyone starts telling them what great global leaders they are and how they're important voices in the world. And that leads to the siren song of globalism for far too many. And they want to support these international institutions like the UN and the World Bank and the IMF and all the World Health Organization. And they are not putting the people of our nation first. We're actually the dead money at the table. They want us to be the world's piggy bank and the world's police force. And by the way, I'm not an isolationist. I don't believe that we should withdraw from the world, but I think the best way to inspire the world is to be the best version of ourselves. And that's what Reagan talked about, being that shining city on the hill that people want to emulate, not because they're forced to or they're addicted to our money or our grants or our aid, but because we showcase the virtue of freedom. And I worry that we're losing grip of that right now, and only with a real shock to the system will we get it back. I get criticized a lot for being a little rough around the edges and being a bit of a blunt force instrument, but isn't that what we need right now? I mean, we need a major reorientation of how government works, because right now it's working for the lobbyists and the corrupt entities that just want cheap, illegal labor. They want trade deals where they make money, but it could cost us manufacturing jobs and cost us our productive sector. And they don't even want us to get our own energy for our people. Like when Joe Biden stops the export of our liquefied natural gas, he's killing investment into the very technologies and resources we'll need for our country.
That's exactly right. Now, AMAC members, I know you have to run. We have a final question for you. AMAC members are very concerned about the 2024 elections because they're concerned we may see some nefarious occurrences or,
Cheating.
Exactly right.
Right?
Because
Let's call
we
it
see
what it is.
dead people on the voter rolls, illegals voting, you name it. How confident are you that we will have a free and fair election? And then in follow-up, is there anything that Congress can do to help that along?
I really wrestle with this because, and I tell you, my views could be malleable, but here are the equities I'm having to balance. On one hand, there should be a federal floor for election integrity, on voter ID, on ballot custody, on just like the basics of how to run an election, not allowing these machines to exist in the absence of a real paper trail and paper ballots. But then I know if we do that, when we have a little power as Republicans, what are the Democrats going to do once elections are nationalized? I mean, they would move to internet voting that could be susceptible to hacking. They would move, you'd have 87 different pronouns on every ballot for the local fire commissioner. And so I do think states are best run at the state and local level. And Barack Obama and Eric Holder knew that. And so they focused on the secretaries of state, attorney general, DA positions, and then they fused their best operatives with all that George Soros money. And that resulted in an ecosystem for them where they got an outsized role in how elections were run. And so they were able to get all these indiscriminate ballots sent out where no one had requested them, where there was not a real clear connection to a vote that was intended to be cast. And so to the concern that I think your members rightly feel, there are changes at the RNC over this. I really think the reason that there's likely a leadership change coming at the RNC is because President Trump was not satisfied that we were putting the requisite focus on voter integrity and election integrity that we needed to. And so the hope is the new team puts that at the top of the list. Some of the more ancillary things fall by the wayside, and we get back to our winning ways.
Thank you so much. Great message, a message of hope for sure. Congressman Gaetz, thank you again for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.